By listening to this podcast, you agree to not use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in yourself or others, including, but not limited to, patients that you are treating. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Neuroendocrine Cancer Awareness Network be responsible for damages arising from use of this podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Let's Get Real with NCAN. I'm your host, Mike Wayman. Before we get to our guest today, Alex O'Connor from California, we met recently at the NCAN San Diego Conference. We actually have to get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. That housekeeping is this Sunday. We have the Miami Net Patient Conference, April 7th in Miami, Florida at the University of Miami. It's going to be great. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter conference than we usually hold, but it's going to be great. We're kind of teaming up with the NANETS conference that's happening the day before. It's going to be a great opportunity to meet some awesome doctors. If you can't make that, we do have one the week after, Saturday, April 13th in Coralville, Iowa. We also have one on May 18th in New Orleans. If you want to know about those and more information about what's coming up with NCAN, go over to netcancerawareness.org, go to the events, and you can get more information there. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media at NetCancerAware. And without further ado, I'd like to invite our guest today, net patient, Alex O'Connor. Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was great to meet you last month in San Diego. It was that was your first NCAN conference?
It was the first one that we've made. We wanted to go in the past. Probably a lot of the audience here understands medical conditions, and so it didn't work out in the past, and I felt that everything happens for a reason, so we were able to show up last time.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great to meet you guys, and it's awesome to meet patients who are so engaged right off the bat. So tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and, what where the location of your tumors are, et cetera.
Sure. So, like many of us, I was misdiagnosed from the very beginning. When I went to the doctor, my primary care physician in, January of 2014 was really when I started super healthy. I was an ex-athlete, and I started with kidney stones. And so I knew nothing about anything, went to the ER, they told me to change my diet, got referred to my primary care to review everything. We did normal blood workup, everything of a normal a palette of everything came back normal. So that was really kind of my first experience of not having a very thorough check of what was going on. A couple months later, I had another bout of kidney stones, went back to my primary care, same exact thing. And on the third time back to my primary care is when I kind of knew something was wrong. I wasn't feeling normal. I was exhausted to a level of, 5 shots of espresso, 24-hour, energy shot, and 12 hours of sleep, and almost like nodding off as I was driving. So I knew something was wrong. I went back to my primary care and was unfortunately blown off at that time. I was a 26-year-old female. My husband is active duty military. I was blown off as a young female and referred to psychiatry. I was pretty persistent at that point. humbly saying, like, I have no problem seeing a psychiatrist. I really honestly don't. But I really wanted a more thorough check as well. So he wasn't very happy with that. And that's kind of a lot of when people reach out to me of advice. I stuck with it. You can be polite and kind and respectful, but still assertive and stern. And so I was, and I insisted on seeing an endocrinologist. It took a couple months. I was then referred to endocrinology, sat down in front of this endocrinologist, was like, listen, I used to party hard in college. I got good grades. I was an athlete. This is different. Exhaustion is different. And he was like, I believe you. So by July of 2014, he just ordered a head MRI. And that was when we first found the prolactinoma. So I have a pituitary tumor in my head. And those were really the only things causing the symptoms. And what's incredible about this endocrinologist is that even though he could have crossed off his T's and said, found it, there's your symptoms, here's your little pill, to slowly shrink that pituitary tumor, go home, he didn't. He said, let's do full body scans. This is unusual kind of thing. And so I was then ordered an abdominal MRI. And that's when I got the call that I had a 3.5 centimeter by 3.5 centimeter mass in the head of my pancreas. There were a couple little ones in the tail. It also showed tumors elsewhere in the body. And so that really, by July of 2014, everything took off. And anybody that's been diagnosed with cancer of any kind totally understands how fast everything starts happening, from emotions to doctor's appointments to understanding, Googling words you've never even heard of or understood in your life. So that's kind of how the timing of when everything started.
Now, in terms of your diagnosis, what do you think is the most important thing for a patient to do to get properly diagnosed?
Definitely. 100%, hands down, see a specialist. That's their forte. That's their job. A lot of times, like in the neuroendocrine cancer world, but also the endocrine system, you want to see an endocrinologist. And really, that's when I was believed, because that's all those doctors do. It didn't sound abnormal. It didn't sound like I was lying about being so tired or whatever. And so hands down, see a specialist, and then hand in hand, go with your gut. A lot of times I've said over the years when people reach out, how did you know? Da, da, da. It's like, whether or not you go with your gut or your God, I believe truly one or the other. In my case, I believe it was very God pushing me. But a lot of people say, stick with your gut, that something is wrong. And that's probably like my biggest advice is see an endocrinologist. If you're in this boat, of course, you're watching NCAN, but a lot of times you just don't want to stick with a primary care for any kind of true diagnosis.
Yeah. Now, so once you were diagnosed, how long ago was that, by the way?
I'm like, what years? 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, 10. Oh, I'm coming up on 10 years actually, this July. And then my biopsy pathology came back first week of August. So that's kind of my cancer diagnosis week.
Okay. So in those 10 years, you mentioned about, Googling words that you never heard before and all that kind of stuff. I think that a lot of new patients of any sort of disease fall into this this like internet black hole that exists, where
Yeah.
there's all sorts of crazy information, you know, differing opinions, all that kind of stuff. Message boards are a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
And Facebook groups are, again, a blessing and a curse, unless you really have somebody there keeping close watch on it, and taking care of you know, any kind of misinformation. What for you has been the most useful and the best outlet for the information that you've been getting?
That's a hard one. You know, you're totally right. It's a blessing and a curse. When we first were learning everything, I think with anybody with cancer, you're deep diving into it. I would say for the most part, of course, I've met people that, you know, it's too overwhelming, and that's so understandable. But yeah, my husband and I dove into it. Once we especially got pathology back, and you hear of, you know, pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer, and you're like, what the heck is that? And along with a lot of my other stuff that we found in, as well as the same time. You, in my case, I'm a very assertive, proactive person. I think that has also become, you know, a blessing and a curse, is I can be my best advocate. I can make all the phone calls. I can make all the appointments, but I can sometimes hyper focus on to crossing my T's and making the calls and saving my own life, you know, which a lot of these, it's extremely unfortunate that so many patients have to be their own advocate. So it's hard. My husband, at one point at the beginning, when we learned that I needed a Whipple surgery, and we started diving into that, and that was really the scariest part of everything, is when you start realizing the reality, you know. And, you know, I was 26 and we were newly married, and I just remember being like, oh my gosh, this is, I can't even comprehend all of this. And he, you know, kind of grabbed me one night and was like, listen, everything we were reading was really bad statistics, you know, bad blogs, sad stuff, you know. And he grabs me and he was like, healthy people are typically not writing comments, writing blogs. Healthy people are out living their life. And that was my first realization that you're right. You know, life is what you make of it, whether or not I was going to be here for 2 years or, you know, 20 years. I needed to create my own happiness. And so I think it was at that time, yeah, I unfollowed some of the blogs and that were, you know, kind of things, but also in the ones that I felt were more helpful than hurtful is where I reached out. I started sharing my story. People and I started connecting if we had similar stories. And then you got to hear the good stories. And so I would say you find your right outlet. Everyone's different. And it really, if you don't want to read anything and you just want to fight your battle and keep your head down and, you know, grind, then go do it. But if you want support, you can find the proper support system if you look.
Now, you mentioned quite a bit about your husband and his involvement and stuff like that. So, and we are, for those of you who are regular listeners, we do plan on having him on the show. He was deployed last month, or yeah, end of last month.
Mm-hmm.
So we were going to try and get him on as well, but his episode will come a little bit later on in the year. But tell us a little bit about his involvement with you know, juggling being deployed and going out on assignment with the military, and your diagnosis.
Yeah, it's been a learning curve. We've had a phenomenal marriage therapist. I think primarily because we were married under 6 months, and he was on deployment when I got diagnosed with cancer. So in 2014, he was away and I was going to all these appointments. And this was not our first deployment. So I felt like, no big deal kind of thing. And getting diagnosed on when your husband's, on deployment is something I would wish on nobody. But we are both fighters. And I remember my parents saying, my mom saying that if you guys can get through this, you can get through anything. He was 24, I was 26. We were, we had the whole our lives ahead of us. And so it was a huge reality check, how much life is short, not just for him, but for me. And I think that was, I'm not going to step on his toes. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. He's typically more of the quiet one. So I'm thrilled he offered, because his perspective is fascinating. I did not give him enough credit how hard it was on him at the beginning. We've learned so much over the last 10 years of each other. And, but I think that the love we have for each other ended up being stronger than the outside stressors. And so we've been through so much. This last deployment 2 years ago, I ended up being re-diagnosed with neuroendocrine cancer and the remaining half of the pancreas. So I'm not very good of when he's on deployment somehow, like I'm sick. But we put on like our boxing gloves and we went to war together again and beat it again. And so, I think that when you have such loving, selfless partner that will go to war for you, it's one of the best blessings in the world, for sure.
That's great. That's great. So if you were to give one uncommon tip, you've been dealing with this for 10 years. So everybody kind of gets their own things to deal with it, with the diagnosis and some of the symptoms and stuff like that, quality of life kind of stuff. If you had one pretty uncommon tip that's just not necessarily out of the ordinary, or maybe it is, maybe it's that something that's always sitting right in front of us, but you're always looking past it. What one tip would you have for net patient if they, again, newly diagnosed, if they haven't been fighting it for a while, or if they just kind of need that reminder?
I think that's a twofold. I think it goes hand in hand that I'm a huge advocate for getting second and third opinions. Twice now, a second and third opinion has saved my life over us going with our initial plan of action. So 100%, it is your right. You call your insurance company, you ask your doctors, respectfully, truly. It has nothing to do with you as a doctor. I've said that before. If they're a really good doctor, they will be all for it. You can call your insurance company. You can ask them of other providers that are in network. They'll give you a list, and then you can send out information of your diagnosis or just of setting up first-time phone call appointments, and but you get those second and third opinions. It is your right, and it is your life. And then on the other hand, get outside. That's probably the biggest thing that has helped me stay positive when we've had really bad news, really bad prognosis. For no matter how tired you are, I have been recovering from a Whipple surgery, unable to walk, and will drive to a location that is beautiful, that is healing for my soul, and I will sit there in my car and I will look at that location, whether it's not the beach or if it's a mountain or if it's something that makes you happy, and you sit there and you sightsee or walk the beach or walk on a hike or take a walk. Do something good for your soul every day, no matter how small it is. If it's reading that book, having that guilty pleasure of whatever it is that makes you happy to go sleep better at night, to taking that trip. Life is short, and I think so often we all get caught up in the heaviness of all of this, and that's so fair. Have a good cry. I'm not saying suppress your emotions, get a good therapist, but also live your life, no matter how short or long it may be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So in terms of being your own advocate, are there any tips that you could share with us that you know any tips that you could share with like a new patient or somebody who's going through it? And also, um, what are some of the things that you do in terms of advocacy and stuff? Like you've got a shirt on with the zebra.
Yes.
So what are some things that you suggest?
Um, yeah, I love the zebra ribbon. I love the meaning behind it. I love the family that it has created, I connecting with people that have it. It's the same thing of finding people that are Whipple warriors, or I had my entire pancreas removed in September of 2022, and total pancreatectomy warriors, and you find your crowd because there's such a unique group of people that are so strong and they're such fighters. And if you emotionally can take that on, I'm a huge advocate for creating awareness. I do believe that I'm still here for a reason. I do believe that hopefully if I can reach one person and they're like, gosh, that sounds familiar, whether it's their self or their sister or their mom, or whoever, that they hear something and they go, yeah, you know what? I am going to make that endocrinology appointment, or I am going to call my insurance company and see, who's in network that I can make phone calls because I don't know where to start. And the same thing where with the third opinions, the best thing my mom did when I was too overwhelmed at the very beginning, she flew out to come help me, and she helped me make different FedEx packages of my paperwork, pathology reports, radiology CDs, and we Googled really best Whipple surgeons in the country, or best whatever you need. And same thing with Mayo Clinic is, Mayo's the best. That's where I got my pancreas removed in 22. And so we called it our Hail Mary. You send out the packages, you send them out, you find your people that will help you, you ask for help if you need it. And my mom was that phenomenal person for me when my husband was gone. She helped me make the packages. We sent them out to the offices, and that's kind of our first step in getting those second and third opinions. So that's probably like my encouragement of being proactive. I know it's overwhelming. It's so important to do. You're saving your own life, and but you can do it. And that's the other thing, is I've met other people, and I think that if you're able to do this alone and humbly even ask for help for other people that will help you, you will feel that boost in strength that you need to keep fighting, for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One more thing I did want to ask about, you attending your first NCAN conference this past February in San Diego. So why do you think it would be important for a patient to attend something like that? And what did you get from your first experience?
Yeah, my husband and I were talking actually on the drive home. We wish we would have gone at the very beginning of a diagnosis. I truly believe, not because you're having me on talking about this, I truly believe that if we had reached out, or we would have gone to one of these conferences at the very beginning, I think it would be much less overwhelming, because the Googling and the blogs and everything, that's what makes it really scary. When you meet, people like you guys and that have been doing this and have incredible resources, that's what these people need at the beginning of this diagnosis, especially, but also the longevity of it. It's always changing. God forbid, you have a re-diagnosis or a metastasis or whatever. NCAN is just a phenomenal foundation that helps give those resources and puts those people in the right path. I wish we would have done that. And so we took a lot of that on ourselves at the beginning, and my mom, and it makes me feel very, sad for everybody, my loved ones, because of how stressful it was. And it seems so scary. It doesn't have to be that way. So my biggest advice is, if you're listening to this, reach out, send the email. If you're in San Diego or West Coast, or you have some kind of similar story of mine, I'm always willing to chat with anybody. I chat with strangers on the internet all the time and kind of push them in the right direction, and I find fulfillment out of that as well. So I don't feel that I'm just helping other people, it's helping me heal as well.
That's great. That's great. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your story with everybody. I hope everybody got something out of this. I think there's some major things that you should be taking away. Again, go see a specialist, and live your life. Live your life. It's super important that no matter how long you have, do what you love, do what makes you happy, because life is too short, right?
Amen.
So, guys, thank you again for joining us. Join us next month for Roger Jones, The Final Victory. He is the author, and he's going to be meeting me in Miami and recording an episode with us. So that'll be great. Again, this Sunday, we are going to be in Miami, Florida. Saturday, April 13th, we're going to be in Coralville, Iowa. In May, we're going to be in New Orleans. In September, we're going to be in Nashville. So if you're in any of those areas and you need more information, go over to netcancerawareness.org. Also, don't forget to check out our social medias at netcanceraware, and be on the lookout for our Spanish speaking live stream, as well as our regular Q&A live streams that'll be happening later this year. And once again, thank you for joining us on Nets Get Real. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.